Ooh, I'm the prize. Ooh, I'm the prize. I'm the prize. Come and feast your eyes. I know you won't fantasize about me. Sweaty. Ooh, how I tantalize, 'cause I'm the prize. Ooh, I'm the prize. I'm an outstanding member of community. I've got prosecutorial immunity. I can do whatever I want. Underline that in your boldest font. I got the back end of the state tailing my whip. Even if I'm popping my in, and it don't matter how shoddy the science. I'm too busy now sexing my clients because I'm the prize. Ooh, I'm the prize. I can put you away before your trial begins. I tell the media all your sins, it don't matter if what I say is true. They believe me, and so do you. I can do anything. I'm above the law. I can do things that'll drop your jaw. I can hide things that I'm supposed to disclose. It don't matter if everybody knows, because I'm the prize. Ooh, I'm the prize. Did I happen to mention immunity? I can control everything that the defense sees. I can cheat, I can lie, I can fabricate, and I can hide. I'm the prize. Ooh, I'm the prize. Sweaty sweat, I'm the prize.
Well, good evening, gentlemen. How are you today? How's the dude? I think you've got your mic muted.
Yep,
How's the dude?
Having trouble with my mouse there. I'm good, man. I'm good.
And how is Walter Sobchak?
I'm doing good. You're out of your element, Donnie.
Don is here. Don is here. Just tell him to shut the whenever you want. Great that you could join us again. Hi there. Basically, I sent a that message to that I got from Mike Griesbach. It would be 3 years ago, round about just over 3 years ago, that I got a reply from Mike Griesbach. If you remember back then, we were waiting for this much vaunted motion by Kathleen Zellner, and there had been quite a sort of a wait, wasn't there? You know, can you remember back then how we were sort of anxiously waiting on, the Zalami coming? It feels a little bit like that now, does it? Would you say?
What, the anticipation of waiting for Judge Angie?
Yeah.
Suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, don't we all? Well, maybe we're wrong, but I mean, I think we're all pretty much assuming what she's going to say, right?
Right.
But maybe we're wrong. I mean, I suppose it's possible.
Right. Travis, do you feel that there's been a bit of, or is it a case of, whilst the duck looks very calm above the water, underneath the legs are going like the clappers?
What the hell did Donnie just say? I am the walrus.
Cuckoo.
I don't know nothing about no ducks, but no, we've this is the way it goes with appellate work. Yeah. And there was a time when I don't want to say people were complaining. People were frustrated back in December when she filed the motion for new DNA testing, which got denied. Mm-hmm. And Erekose and I did a segment, or he invited me to do a segment on his channel about, look, it's not easy to be a follower of a case in the middle of the appellate process. And then we also discussed this frustration, people that rode the roller coaster on Brendan's case with, Drizzen and Nyrider winning and then winning again in the Seventh Circuit, only to, face the en banc panel. And then
It was less of a roller coaster, more of an ascent and a sudden drop off a cliff is more what it was like.
yeah. And so, it's difficult, and I don't know what to read into this. I agree with Tracy, that there's something up with this thing taking so long. Absent, sometimes judges get ill and, they're away from their work for quite a while, or they're in the middle of a protracted trial, a 6-month trial or something. But Tracy would know if that's the case, and I haven't heard anything other than, it's the normal, usual course of business for her. And so, I don't know what to read into it. It's highly unusual in the state court system for something to take this long, but I think everybody anticipated she was going to do the same thing she did in the other motion that got technically, it got sent back, but they didn't call it a remand. It was on the Brady stuff with reference to the computer, and she denied that on the last day. And so I think everyone, is anticipating, just deny it, get on with it, and then, Zellner can file her brief and we can move forward. But, there's significant stretches of time involved. What's interesting about this deal, though, is what's the expression? We were not at the forefront. We were right at the beginning of this whole issue that we're in the middle of. On December 18th, we did that show about, wait a minute, she's asking for testing on these bones, and they've given the bones back. And yet, here we are. So there's a lot, I think, with the Wrecking Crew, there's a lot of keen interest in this motion. I don't know, Erekose, do you think it's any more keen than any of the other motions? But I mean, that was kind of fun and interesting being, in the middle of that, or at the beginning of that, rather, and then
That's where
having it.
That's where we first saw that the state was hiding things, which brings me to my point that you kind of caused me to occur to have while you were talking there, which is talking about this decision from Judge Suk and all that, and how we're waiting for it, and you don't even know what to make of it and all that sort of stuff. And brings me back to, remember the claims of it was Zellner stalling this thing and dragging this thing out? It's all Zellner's fault. It's her that's playing games and whatever, and that she's, but like, it's not Zellner that was holding things back from, it was you guys holding the CD back and then choosing to give it over after the 97406 is denied. Then you hand it over instead of handing it over before, where it could have been made part of it, right? So that's very suspicious to start with. And then you go and you find out about these pages of queso that weren't handed over and the ledgers that showed what happened and what they gave back and everything. And that's not handed over either. And it's the state playing games that created this new issue. And then now here we have Judge Suk, who's now holding this thing and sitting on it. And yeah, like Travis saying, who knows what to make of it. Most likely, though, she's probably going to go follow suit like and do something similar to what she did before with the CD and say nothing to see here. But maybe she'll surprise us. But to get back to the point I'm hammering here, it's not Zellner that's wasting anybody's time here. It has never been Zellner wasting anybody's time here. I just got to keep hammering that every once in a while. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, dude. I've just noticed your T-shirt. You couldn't perhaps do us a favor? Just stand up. Let us see the full effect.
Hey, this is a special T-shirt that only I have, and all the members of the family who had it made for me all had their own T-shirts like this. So this is a very special edition I got at Raleigh.
Yeah.
Erekose Wrecking Crew shirt, and it was made by Wrecking Crew Zelma and her family. It was designed by her daughter, and then they had the shirts made up for one for each of them and one for me. So.
And whereabouts were they from? They were from miles away, weren't they?
Yes. I don't actually recall.
West Coast somewhere, right?
I'm going to say it's somewhere near Crunch Island, if I remember rightly.
Is it Crunch Island? Yeah. It may be.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I'm sure they'd done a hell of a lot of traveling to get there. Hey, Travis, next year, if we either have a rally, a justice rally, or a party, you must come along, because I tell you what, you'd enjoy the crack with the lads at Manitowoc.
Yeah, looks like I missed a really good time, but want to try and get Erekose over to Scotland.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, Travis says he's going to rent that island for a weekend.
Yeah.
For a week.
I've just had a quick question from Don. Where have you been taking that Justice Mobile? It's actually Eunice's car, but I on the occasions that I get to use it, I've been up to Edinburgh a few times in it, and then this coming Wednesday, I'm travelling down to Liverpool, so it'll be going down to Liverpool all the way around Liverpool. So yeah, watch out for it. I'll be there. Sorry, quickly just answering Don's question there. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Travis, getting back to our party at Manitowoc, the bits that I can remember of it were absolutely fantastic. So God knows what the bits of it that I can't remember were like.
Sounds like my kind of event.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it was Denise Rainey that actually took video of some of the bits that I can't remember that well. No, sorry. just moving on.
That was cool. That was so much fun.
Yeah. That
was a hilarious time, dude. It was just the music, putting on the music, and then watching you teaching Allie to dance and everything. Was hilarious. It was just so funny, dude. It was hilarious, dude. And you were just like. Between the dancing and then the booze, and the dancing and booze, it was just funny to watch.
I can tell you, I suffered the next morning. You notice I was quite quiet to and from Nina.
Yeah. I'll tell you what. In the morning, I went to go take my shower to get ready to go to Eagle Nation, and I was surprised you were up that early, already in there before me. I was like, son of a this kid. I figured he'd be out till noon.
Yeah. And the best of it was coming back. I'm thinking I could really do with hair of the dog. Dude, can we stop and I'll get a hair of the dog? No.
Well, you should have told me you'd pound it.
Sorry?
So you should have said, I'll pound one.
What does that mean?
It means you down it quickly.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. What I was going to say, getting back to what we were just talking about there, this sort of what might be construed to be a bit of a lull. I was going to ask you, do you feel that since Making a Murderer has come out, Netflix have realised that there is a lot of interest in this true crime stuff, particularly wrongful convictions. And I would say that we seem to have had almost a bit of an avalanche of, well, not just Netflix, but particularly Netflix. Well, I've put down a list of some of the stuff they've come out with recently. When They See Us, the confession tapes, Exhibit A, The Great Hack. You know, you've got all these other stuff like the case against Adnan Syed. You've got all this stuff that's all coming out now. And it seems as if Netflix are determined to present to us, the sort of most egregious stuff out there. Would you say that although we haven't got to Making a Murderer #3, I don't think we've even got around to talking about it. Netflix are really keeping the pressure on the powers that be with their release of these great documentaries.
Yes. I think it is. I think it's brilliant. It's like, if you imagine it in basketball terms, it's kind of like a full court press where, Netflix is just going like, look, here's the evidence of this happening all over the place. And you're trying to tell us where we see all these indicators of something untoward going on, that everything was fine, no problem, nothing to see here. That's what's, hard to believe, but I believe having all these different things coming out, Exhibit A particularly, I mean, those cases are very interesting, but particularly the first one where that dude is freaking gargantuan, dude. It's ridiculous that they actually mistook him for the actual perpetrator in that one. It's like, I mean, just so many things. I'll tell you what, to this day, the fact that the Scott Davis case, they lost ultimately in the end, it was only 50 pieces. They found 22 of the 72 pieces. So it was only 50 missing pieces of evidence, but it was all very important pieces of evidence, one of which was a blood sample from a person they believed to be the killer, which had never been run through CODIS, and prints from someone they believed to be the killer, which had never been put through APHIS. And when things like that can happen and everybody can just go, yeah, that's cool. We're good with that. That is shocking to me, to be missing that much evidence, and then to go forward and prosecute on this, and it's a circumstantial case, and it's obvious now that they ignored the statements of Megan, where she actually knows that David has been shot while the house is literally still burning. How could she know? Well, is she Firewalker? Right? So it's like we have problems, huge problems.
Yeah, and you've just done videos about freedom of speech. What is she trying to do to your videos in Australia?
Right.
So.
I don't get freedom of speech in Australia. Australia is shaky ground for me.
Nah.
Well, at least when I talk about her.
They love you there, dude. They love you. I
don't think Netflix is doing anything. It's not Netflix.
It's people making.
They're not a drive behind criminal justice reform. They're
becoming a popular platform for these.
Well, no, they're a huge platform, but there have been many documentaries. I think they're in it to make money like anybody else, but you got to remember, these two ladies are in graduate film school, and Netflix didn't fund them. They were funded by family and friends,
right.
And then went into this thing, and then they got unprecedented access because one, they were probably female, and the other is that they're quote students unquote, and they've talked about this in shows, and they were treated kind of like patting them on the top of the head. Oh, how cute, y'all are making a little movie. And so they got to spend hours with the lawyers that they normally otherwise wouldn't.
Yep.
So then, they package all that up, and then, you take that to film festivals and you get it released, and then you hope somebody like HBO or Showtime or Netflix picks it up, which it did. So what Netflix isn't going out and funding documentarians to do work on these trials and these issues, but they are a platform where they have a huge audience. I think both of you have mentioned, it's the #1 documentary that's been watched on Netflix by a far cry, and that it's the #1 documentary watched on any platform, and it's up over 30 million views or something. Y'all can tell me better on that, but no, it's awesome that they provide a platform, but people have been interested.
I just think it encourages other filmmakers who want to do this out there, this particular topic even. They're out there going, hey, you know what? It doesn't seem like such a stupid idea maybe to try and make it now, because they know that Netflix is like, they know that there's a good chance that, if they make it well enough, that it could get bought and then it could, people will see it. Where it would build confidence.
The journalists that really do the groundbreaking stuff is the print journalists. There's one at Rolling Stone, and there's always usually one or two at the New York Times, and there's a few in Texas, and they're always at the forefront of really breaking this stuff. And you mentioned before we went live about the journalism school professor in Chicago with his student showing, hey, you can make a difference. It's if you really look at this and what's really happening, I'm glad Brendan and Stephen got their case out there, because we've said this over and over and over again. For every Making a Murderer, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of cases that meet the same criteria that never get the national or international exposure. But this isn't anything new. I mean, you look at that case with that girl over in Italy that gets prosecuted.
Amanda
documentary. The West Memphis 3, a 3-part HBO series. The trial, the aftermath, and then the exoneration. Trilogies aren't a new thing. This stuff keeps happening and it never goes away. It's not a new phenomenon, but I've been doing this for over 30 years, and it's not my first rodeo. I keep seeing it over and over and over again. The only difference is whether it's a local journalist that makes a major breakthrough or a student documentary team, but by and large, it's really, really good print journalists that break this stuff wide open and bring awareness where it counts locally.
Right.
But, it hasn't done anything in terms of trying to get people to rethink what the presumption of innocence is and what the burden of proof is. What does beyond a reasonable doubt mean? Nor should it. And they've laid out what the purpose of their original documentary was. Bring awareness to the case, bring up what the evidence was on both sides and let people make their own conclusions. That's the same thing that was done in the first West Memphis 3 documentary. Then a group of supporters out in California that were in PR and whatnot, they looked at it and they go, man, these 3 guys are innocent. And, you know, it picks up groundswell. It's Bob Dylan hearing about a guy in prison that was the victim of massive racial prejudice in his in the investigation, the trial, the appeal, and picking up the cause. It's people talking about it on these social media platforms and whatnot. But so my answer to the question is no, Netflix isn't doing anything new other than, you know, they advented the streaming platform as an alternative to cable, and it's a great audience. You know, they're huge audience, and it's it may have got passed by HBO or Showtime. If it was, somebody's, you know, kicking themselves in the head. But I think Netflix does have a lot of things that you ordinarily wouldn't see. That's what I've been finding, is that these things like Behind the Curve and other documentaries, they do have a lot of great documentaries on Netflix on a whole range of subjects.
Yep.
And so I'm glad it all worked out the way it did. Otherwise, you know, there's a good chance, you know, none of us would be here right now. It'd be on something else. But
Yep. Can I just point out, you mentioned the documentary by the guy David Protes. Well, actually, it features David Protes. Of course, it's by Sean Reck. I would advise everybody to go and watch A Murder in the Park. Now, it's on Netflix, but it's also in the UK, and obviously because of the fact that it's now 7:35 in the morning, I realised that quite a lot of America is sleeping at the moment. So you can access that on Netflix. For those that can't, if you go to Linda K Listening, Linda K, one of our supporters, she has got it on her channel. In fact, why don't I even post the link while I ask this next question? Do you think there will ever be a documentary series quite like Making a Murderer, though? Because it's in 2 parts. It's in two part 1 and part 2. It's, as Travis quite rightly pointed out, the first bit was Laura and Moira had to go and sell it to Netflix. But I'm pretty sure that Netflix then took over and said, we're going to do a series 2. I don't think it was a case of Laura and Moira saying, can we sell you this second lot?
I seem to remember
Donnie.
Yeah.
When you have a part 1 that sells 30 million views,
yeah,
it you know, it doesn't take a genius to say we're going to do a part 2. And then depending on the number of views of that will determine whether there's a part 3. And of course, the outcome will also determine that. But
you'll start to hear talk about part 3 when there's developments, like a decision or a something or other like that. Things they can report on because they have to have something to say, right?
Well, and it's you know, and how many hours are we talking about? So there's this great documentary on HBO, Who Killed, 2 parts. I mean, really good, high quality stuff. But, you know, they were able to do the whole thing in 2 parts. And that guy got totally railroaded. And I don't want to put any spoilers in it, but there's a major procedural twist on the first day of trial. Major. I've never heard of it. In fact, we're not allowed to do it in Texas. Both sides have to agree, but in New York, only the defendant can do it unilaterally. But again, I don't want to do any spoilers, but no, I think it's the same thing with Rolling Stone, the New Yorker, Atlantic, all of these publications that cover injustices in the criminal justice system. They provide a forum for these awesome writers, but you still got to sell newspapers, and you still got to sell magazines, and you still have to sell subscriptions. And so Netflix is what is going to. They're not in it for charity. They're not in it for social cause. They're a multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporation, and
they're aware the interest is there. And then they will.
Unless you all are aware of some benevolent purpose on their part.
I never speculated as to Netflix's motives. I just said that it is a platform that's there that people are starting to become reasonably sure is friendly to wrongful conviction documentaries, and that may give some folks out there who were thinking about making one or something the confidence to go ahead and do it, because they may feel better about their chances about it getting picked up. That's all I'm saying. Whether or not Netflix's motives are pure or not I wasn't speculating on.
Well, I don't know if it pure or not. It's a platform that's way better than that. There's a YouTube platform that's kind of taken over for Court TV that's doing the Rosenbaum trial, Something Crime. That y'all know that platform. They cover trials all over, and
I watched YouTube videos from it.
Yeah, but so that's awesome. You can see these things in real time, and I'm glad there was an outlet rather than a lot of this stuff just ends up in here in Austin we call the arts theater, and you have to go to a movie theater to see these documentaries, and and these independent art films. And there's 2 theaters in town, one downtown and one up north, but that's all they show is independent, award-winning documentaries and films. But they're the art films that you don't have mass distribution, and back in the day, that's where it would have ended up. I totally agree. So from that standpoint, it's great that Netflix is there and
open to it. Let's say.
Yeah, but so it's nothing against Netflix. That they're very successful. They're producing their own shows, and they did produce the second show, and so they'll put their money at risk, or they'll look at the project. But this isn't anything new. You all saw the Eileen Warnes's documentaries by that guy Nick, whatever his name is. He did part 1, and it was showing the trials of Eileen Wuornos in Florida. And then part 2, when she's about going through the process of being executed. But he's from the UK, and you know who I'm talking about, Nick. Help me, Erekose. Nick. Okay, you know who I'm talking about. But he's a hard-hitting documentarian, and he goes out and gets it, and then hopes to sell it, and then based on the success of that, hopes to get a new one. But you know, this is nothing new, thank goodness. Truman Capote, back when, you know, there was magazine articles, which he was intending to do a magazine article about that murder in Kansas, the Clutter family, and then he calls his editor and says, "This is way more than a magazine article. I think I've got a book here," and that was one of the best-selling books of all time in the English language. It made him a multi-millionaire. He really never wrote anything after that. And but you know, he invented that type of true crime genre until what's her name's book on Bundy, Sleeping with, is it the Enemy?
The Enemy.
And then that
The Stranger Beside Me, or whatever.
Yeah, Stranger Beside Me. And you know, but people have always been fascinated about true crime, and you know, we're just, certain people are wired that way. On Goodreads, the platform, if you're into reading books, and you can track the books you've read, and you know, there's all kinds of ratings and reviews. I mean, one of the biggest groups, hundreds of thousands of people, it's on true crime, and you know, everybody's reading a true crime book, and they're always coming out. But I will say that those ladies brought the coverage of a trial through a documentary model to a new level. They have set a very, very high bar. But and not only that, but to make part two as interesting as it was, you know, because we're still talking about law and procedure, and so they were smart to work a deal with Zellner. Zellner probably had requirements that she was in X% of the footage, and that, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, you negotiate, well, I want to be in at least 25% of the screen time, or I want to, you know, this or that. But you look at the Zellner segments, and then they got, you know, really good access with the legal team at Northwestern, those three lawyers, Steve, Laura, and the other guy that was an integral part, the older guy with the...
Robert Dvorak.
Yeah. And if you go look at the West Memphis 3 trilogy, it's following the same kind of format. You know, trial wasn't near as long, but, you know, trial, and then the second part was covering the post-conviction stuff, and they were years and years apart, because those guys were in for close to 20 years. And but you know, my point is that I'm glad that people are doing this in every format, and I'm glad that highly skilled journalists are doing it, because there are a lot of incidents that just get so bogged down in conspiracy theory. You know, the JFK assassination, you know, probably 300 or 400 books on that, and there's some really good ones, and then there's a bunch of garbage, and the garbage detracts from the really solid reporting and investigative journalism. But I'm glad those ladies saw a little article in the New York Times about this case in Wisconsin, and they
Yeah.
went up there to go check it out. But we wouldn't
To
be
answer
here
Paul's-
either.
Yeah. Well, to answer Paul's question, like, do I think there'll be another Making a Murderer, or is there likely to be? And I guess for me, I have to answer your question with another question. Is law enforcement in this country now looking at what happened in Making a Murderer and thinking, we will never ever be careless when we are dealing with somebody who's been wrongly convicted once? No running this shite investigation when the guy's been wrongfully convicted once. We want to be having no question here.
Mm-hmm.
That's so. I mean, hopefully, maybe law enforcement has learned that. Don't run the shite investigation like you saw here when the guy's been wrongfully convicted once, because if you run a shite investigation with sketchy evidence that doesn't make any sense, people are going to probably call you on your BS.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But obviously, this case is so unique because for me, it wasn't just a case of it was a bad investigation. It was one that was flawed. It was a deliberate frame up of an innocent man. Well, two innocent people. What
You may be right.
So
You probably are.
yeah,
I just phrase things a little less
yeah.
confrontationally, I guess.
I know, just going back though on something that Travis was saying there about the fact that obviously Netflix are in it for the money, and I think that
No, I didn't say that.
Yeah,
I said that they are a business.
yes, yeah,
And they're publicly traded, and unless they make money, they can't continue to pour money into projects like this. And so yeah, they're in it for the money, but in the good sense.
yeah. But what I was going to point out, kind of like in defense of you, is the fact that and Netflix is the fact that they cannot surely be seen to be doing these documentaries for a political motive.
No, I disagree with that entirely.
Exactly.
No, people are going to spin, and it has been spun.
Yeah.
It got spun from the get-go.
Yeah.
Here's what was left out of Netflix. They're leading you around.
Yeah.
No, and both sides are going to say, the liberal media, what the people in Hollywood want you to believe, and and then both sides, every issue, there's always and this happened in West Memphis 3 a lot, is that these documentarians are putting spin on it.
Yeah.
And so, no, it's, I don't think Netflix, there are certain magazines, print journalism, that they are wholly devoted to criminal justice reform, and they're constantly doing articles about it. But the fact that Stephen and Brendan got completely let down by his original defense attorney, and then
every attorney he had until he got Knight Rider in prison. Even his trial attorney, not allowing the jury to hear that.
You guys
final
are Monday morning quarterbacking again, and when you've tried about 50 jury trials, come and tell me about how good or bad they were. But they
Let's not let him hear
how much money were they given by the court? How much did they ask for?
I don't know.
You know, you have to be able to answer these questions. It's not the lawyers, it's the system that they have to operate in. They probably asked for 5 experts and the judge said, I'm going to give you 1. We need 25,000 for experts. I'm going to give you 2,000. That happens all the time. And then you know, it's like, oh, well, the attorneys. And I don't know the answers to those questions, but no, the people are upset with them. For example, they conceded it was Teresa Halbach. If you look at the first 2 or 3 days, they didn't contest anything. They didn't even contest the dogs. But you see, when you read their opening statements, you see what the theory of their case was. Look, we're not going to contest that that's Teresa Halbach. We're not going to contest that the sniffer dogs hit on this or that. And then he hits it right from the beginning. You will not see any of our client's DNA. This isn't a trial. This isn't a trial about Stephen Avery. This is Brendan's case. And you will not see any DNA. You won't see any fibers. You won't see any of this. They did a phenomenal job. And then the one thing that they had to overcome, his confession, and then the bad ruling with the judge. Mm-hmm. You know, it's sometimes you're just put in a. Sometimes you end up with a case that only Clarence Darrow could win. You know, and. But they preserved all the errors they needed. And, you know, I don't know what attorneys have come out and said. I'm talking about attorneys who know what they're talking about and practice in the criminal defense arena, have said that they did, you know, a horrible job at trial.
Well, let me clarify.
I haven't seen any of that.
Let me clarify a little bit. In certain ways, Brendan's trial lawyers, attorneys, were actually very effective and very good. They actually did their job pretty well, and I can say I was impressed with certain things. What I was getting at, and you know, maybe I was a little too overzealous about it, but what I was getting at is that Brendan's attorneys, his trial attorneys, are the ones that decided. They conceded with the state when the state said, we'd like to stop listening to the confession tape there, where basically the jury did not get to hear when Barb comes in the room and Brendan says, well, when he has his whole exchange with Barb, you know, that he didn't actually do it, you know, and all that sort of stuff where he's recanting. And I mean, I don't know how they could have agreed not to let the jury hear that. That to me is something they needed to hear.
Well, I actually wonder if actually Fremdrum and Edelstein, if they actually did their homework and watched or listened to the full 4 hours themselves, did they even realize what they were missing?
That's a fair question in my mind.
You know, but yeah,
I don't know the answer to that. But what I do know is it's utter speculation, and you know, nobody with any credibility or background or expertise in trial law that, you know, I've seen has criticized. Now, I don't know what IAC claims were brought on behalf of Brendan on appeal.
Well, what are your thoughts?
It would have to have been in his direct appeal because.
As an attorney, what are your thoughts about that? As an attorney, what would you have done if you were Brendan's lawyer? And that would you have wanted the jury to hear that? Brendan's recanted.
So this is a part where she comes in. I don't think he recants, but he's starting to waffle, and then they run back in the room, right?
He says they got to my head. You know,
What if his story is different to mine? Because that's what he's hoping that that's going to be the case.
Hoping Steve is going to tell the truth about he wasn't involved, and therefore that will set him free. I mean, that's the way it all looks.
I thought that there was court ruling on that, but I haven't read. I'm only in the first volume of the transcript.
The way I remember it is that they agreed to it. It was stipulated or something or whatever. The prosecution asked, you know, we'd like to go ahead and cut it off there if there's no objection, and then the defense didn't object.
If that's the case, you know, I wouldn't agree with that. Now, here's the more important question: Did that make a difference in the verdict? No.
You don't think it would have? You don't?
that minute thing, her coming in. Oh, they got to my head. You know, they got the phone call in where he says, I guessed, you know, like a test.
Well, that's the prison call, and that was pretty damning as well.
Yeah.
So,
you know,
but even that was gotten under really crappy circumstances.
Well, as it turns out, you know, based on the appellate court decisions, that confession, you know, interrogation is good. It wasn't coerced. And so where that comes down, and both of you know this by now, it's almost near impossible to get a jury to believe that somebody would confess to something they didn't do. Y'all know that.
We know that that's currently the situation, and that it needs to change.
And so you think that 5 seconds of her coming in, Brendan, you know, they got to my head is going to make a difference? It's not, you know. And for people to be...
You also have to remember they would have probably been pretty damn impressed with him holding up on the stand. Because it's pretty obvious that he's not the sharpest kid. You know?
I thought he did a great job on the stand.
And he did a great job on the stand. It's exactly it. They would have been looking at him going, wow, he didn't falter. He held... I mean, think about how many times a defendant doesn't testify because his lawyers know the prosecution will be able to bring in this evidence, that evidence. They'll be able to grill him for hours and hours and try to make him slip up. And Brendan went through it. He went through it and he came through unscathed. That would have had to have been somewhat impressive.
Well, he didn't come through unscathed. You know, where did you come up with this stuff? I don't know. Well,
okay, so the question over...
You wrote it, well, a book. What book? And so he did good on that, and then, you know, there's just so much that it's unknown behind. You know, people were critical. Oh, well, he really got that stuff from the movie, and they should have, you know, put that out there. But you just don't know. They may have asked Brendan. I don't even 10 know times in trial prep, you know, okay, where would you have come up with this stuff if you were guessing? Did you read it in a book? No. Did you see it on TV? No. A movie? No. And then it pops out on the stand, and
does he need
that happen?
The way they're prompting him, oh, that's when he raped her, right? Oh, that's when he stabbed her. Oh, that's when he... You know, and that's when this happened, right? And they're leading him.
Yeah,
you know,
but they didn't buy any of that. The jury didn't.
They may not have, but
so here's the question: Did his trial attorneys bring all of that out?
I get it. You're questioning.
And they did. And they absolutely did, and they made a record that Laura and Steve could work with to the point that they got a federal judge to rule that confession was coerced, but but you know, got a really bad ruling, which on the telephone call, which the federal magistrate said, well, I can't get into that because it's precluded by EDPA, but I can get into this other thing. It's just, you know, read Teddy Roosevelt's speech about in the arena, and then y'all get back to me.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sure. I need to go soon, by the way.
Yeah.
Where? What do you have? What do you have? You have nothing. You gonna make chorizo and eggs?
That's
Yeah.
it.
Once Stephen Avery was convicted, did Brendan Dassey stand a chance?
Yeah. Okay.
If I mean, look at it another way.
Wait. What?
If Stephen Avery hadn't have been convicted, what would have Brendan's chances of being convicted? Would they have diminished? Yeah, sorry. The original question, Travis. Once Stephen Avery was convicted, did Brendan stand a chance? I don't think Brendan stood a chance. Once they'd, you know, Stephen Avery was.
Wait a minute. What was the order? What was the order of the trials?
It's Steve and then Brendan. Steve was in February, March, wasn't it?
Yeah. And when was Brendan's?
It was like March, April, I think.
Right after.
Yeah.
Because King Kratz and Tom Fallon couldn't run two at the same time. Remember, they were telling two different stories. They didn't want to get mixed up.
No.
Yeah, they changed their theory, and you know, it's a completely different trial, but it certainly makes it very difficult. But I'm only into the first transcript of that trial and have a long way to go. But right from the get-go, they were tackling that very, very effectively in the opening statement. You know, this isn't the Stephen Avery trial. You know, this is his trial, and but they had to hit that confession head on.
Yeah.
And you know, the way I look at it, that I mean, people you know, don't have the first clue, or highly critical of Buting and Strang, to the point where people are even saying Buting was in a conspiracy of some sort, and with, you know, no factual evidence, nothing, just you know, just bizarre stuff. But they did, you know, an incredible job on Stephen. A lot of the stuff you guys argue, you know, look how many of the 80 things, Finn's 80 things, were covered by Buting and Strang. And I mean, the key fob wasn't lost on them. I mean, everybody's being sued over that right now, that testimony. You know, they uncovered the license plate being called in and what the significance of it was. And on and on and on and on, to the point where all three of them, Buting, Strang, and Stephen, really thought that they had reasonable doubt, and they had a chance of either a hung jury or an outright acquittal, to the point where Stephen was given the option, when that juror asked to be excused,
Yeah.
And they said, you have the option. You can have a mistrial right now, or we can go forward and I can place the alternate, but you have to agree, Stephen. They said, no, I want to go forward. And, you know, it's, we'll just never know. But I take your point. You know, it definitely makes it much, much more difficult to win when your co-defendant was found guilty. I mean, it's really, really difficult. And then keep in mind, you know, they were negotiating with Brendan all the way up until the day before Stephen's trial was to begin. You know, we know that they were making offers. The state didn't think they had the most airtight of case, even, you know, with that DNA evidence that they had, but they were, you know, I don't know what the lowest offer was, 10, 12 years. You know, but they were offering him significantly less what he was exposed to. And everybody was saying, well, we don't know. We don't, you know, we can't comment on, you know, what's going to happen. But my recollection, you all know better, is that it wasn't known for sure until the day before trial, right? Whether he was going to testify on behalf of the state.
Yeah, a couple of interesting things you mentioned. One of the criticisms of Dean and Jerry was the fact that they never hired a witness. Experts, and one of the experts that they did hire was Larry White, and of course he never got the chance to testify because Brendan didn't make an appearance at Steve's trial, did he? So therefore, had they had this sort of trial at the same time, surely then Larry White, this defense expert on wrongful confessions, could have had a chance to talk about why what Fallon said at the end was completely phony.
I mean, what he said about innocent people don't confess?
Yeah.
Well, so the context of that would have been Brendan would have come in and he would have been the star witness. And he would have testified against his uncle and said, yeah, he put me up to this and this happened and that happened. And then they had to be prepared. They had to have something. And so they were going to have their own false confession expert come in and say, look, this is why I falsely confessed. And I'm sure they would have had Dean do it because he's pretty effective being able to make major points without being offensive. And I probably would have had him cross Brendan, and they would have argued, look, if we were in Brendan's shoes, we can't fault him for taking a deal. But they had to have an expert in there to somehow explain this horrible confession and horrible plea bargain deal where and it was actually heading that way until they got Lynn Kaczynski off of the case. It's just so frustrating about Lynn and what he caused, but
yeah.
Can I just mention about Mike Halbach there, just before you carry on? Mike Halbach, whose sister was supposedly murdered by Steve and Brendan, and you hear Mike Halbach saying, just watch the tape, just watch the tape,
Yeah.
put it in your DVD, play the tape. That's the case there. I mean, the fact that he never watched it himself is irrelevant, but he's advocating that Brendan take the plea deal. Now, my point would be this: that Mike, if you really think that Brendan did it, why are you wanting him to get a lesser sentence?
This stuff, none of this plays well. That his sister was murdered by somebody, and he drew the short straw and was the spokesman for the family, and the media asked for comment and did the best he can. He suffered through the same stuff that the Watts, the wife family, just did a press release. So all these crazy theories on him. It just doesn't do any good, in my view, to question anybody in that family doing or not doing anything. They've got a daughter, sister, niece, aunt who's dead as a result of foul play. And it doesn't have any bearing on the legal process. What he said or didn't say at a press conference, you don't see Zellner. You see Zellner going after the judge. You see Zellner going after legitimate suspects. I don't think you've seen anywhere where she's gone after the Halbachs. And I think in that live Twitter feed, she said to do so would be, quote, inappropriate, end quote. And, I'm not comment about what Mike didn't or did say, or anybody in that family would be, quote, inappropriate, unquote.
Well, me, myself, I feel very similar to Travis, but I can't help but not be very kind of interested in the fact that Michael Halbach was starting his grieving process before they even knew she was dead. And that was always a little bit strange to me. So, but like I said, I agree mostly with Travis. It's not, I'm really not one to criticize the Halbachs in any way other than that point.
Well, I mean, if when the truth finally comes out that they were involved in, or at least Mike Halbach, in a cover-up to try and frame Steve, then I think then is probably the time to really
what
point
evidence?
out.
What evidence is there that the Halbach family?
No, not the
was
Halbach
involved
family.
in a cover-up.
No, I've been very clear about this. Mike Halbach is a member of the Halbach family. He clearly knew something had happened to his sister when she was only a missing person.
Oh, good God! You're going down the slippery slope, my friend.
In the case of Sullivan murders,
he went to high school with this guy, who went to high school with that guy. No.
In the case of the Surrey murders, the fact that Maxine Carr said they were, past tense, nice girls, immediately the journalists jumped on that and said, you need to check this out. How you're saying that was just a slip of the tongue by Mike?
I'm saying it's totally inappropriate to even point in the general direction of anybody in that family.
Yeah, but how often do we hear
with a pending case? All you do is take away from the credibility of what his legal team's trying to do.
Yeah, but often
You think this all went over Zellner's head, that these people, looking at press conferences, somehow, Zellner and her team missed it, and there's the key to the case. I think it's a bunch of crazy people that have developed a theory that are just so keen on having their theory be the one, that it's a bunch of nonsense when there's live active pleadings with decisions to be made. And you look at the captain of, by all accounts, one of the greatest post-conviction legal teams practicing in America today, and what does she say about conversations with the family? They're inappropriate. I don't think it does any good for anybody to speculate about what, this is the Nancy Grace bullshit approach. And she'd get these people on, these so-called psychologists that were experts in body language, that could somehow divine somebody's telling the truth or being deceptive by their body language. This is exactly how people get falsely accused and then ultimately falsely convicted. It's just bizarre. But I don't know. Maybe Erekose's got another view on that. Maybe he was able to divine some gesture or slip of the tongue that implicates Mike Halbach in his sister's murder.
No, I'm not saying anything of that sort, but anyway, I'm just going to say what I said. I mean, it's interesting you made that comment. I'm not saying it means he did something or didn't do something. I'm just saying it was interesting. I mostly agree with Travis on this. I do have to go, so I just want to end on this note. I do mostly agree with Travis, and almost entirely, in fact. I believe that the Halbach family should be pretty much off limits. That's why I've never done a video about Mike, even though I was tempted at a couple points.
Yeah.
I was tempted to do one, but I didn't, because my rule is, just like Zellner, stay away from the family. That's it. It's just the rule I have. It's just a rule some people have, some people don't. And those people encounter whatever they encounter when they don't have a rule like that. Yeah. And that may be fine for them, but I personally choose to be respectful. So on that note,
can I just finish off just very quickly by pointing out that I'm not suggesting that Kathleen Zellner should be going after the Halbachs. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying at the time that the press should have been on to what was being said. I think the press should have picked up on that. Yeah,
they should have maybe listened to that and went, and maybe they might have investigated
it. Exactly.
More. Yeah, and that's all water under the bridge now. So
yeah. And as I agree with a lot of people, I'm not part of Zellner's team. I'm allowed to have my opinion on what's going on here, and clearly there is a lot of things that are going wrong here. But yes, I agree that it's not up to Zellner to sort of to put out a load of stuff. I mean, she's certainly got a lot of suspicion on Ryan Hillegas. She's got a lot of suspicion on Scott Taddick and Brent and Bobby Dassey. But
Bobby.
Yeah, Bobby. But I can't help thinking that this is going to come back and bite Mike. If we get to the bottom line, he's going to have some explaining to do.
Yeah, I don't see anything concrete enough for me to agree with you. So I'm going to have to say, I don't know about that one.
No, I agree. You do have the right to you definitely have the right to your opinion on that and whatnot. But I will say this. People thought they had the right to their opinion on Burke Ramsey. And then they crossed the line from opinion to fact. And they got sued like CBS for $150 million. He successfully settled that case. He successfully sued and shut down a social media platform thing. I agree. Everyone's got a right to their opinion on it, but there's no right to a statement of fact that's unsupported. It's potentially defamation. But like I've said to Erekose in the past, it's so much easier for me because I just live in the legal context. And Stacy and I talked about this when he was down for the interviews. I really don't have to think in this. It's my multiple hat analogy. Some people wear a hat where they're looking at it from the legal perspective. Some people are looking at it, the hat with, being an armchair investigator, which a lot of good has come from armchair investigations. Third hat is people are just interested in true crime genre. And most people wear multiple hats, but my primary hat is trying to educate people about the criminal justice system in general and the legal procedure and wranglings on this case in particular. And part of that process is separating out fact from fiction, from conspiracy to, and so when you blend the topics, and I find myself doing it, that's an interesting theory. Maybe there is 6 RAV4s, 3 blue and 3 green. But, whatever it might be, I get the easy way out and say, it's not a question and issue. It's not a legal issue. It's not before the court in the appeal process. So I really don't need to think about that, or this is the type of investigation you can do that really results in something, because happen to luck out at the right time at the right place on reading that motion in the context of what other people have commented about the bones, and it jumped out at me, they've given back the bones. To me, there are so many good legal issues that Zellner has, plus the capability of her team, that I really don't need to run down rabbit trails.
Yeah, Trud Zellner, she's got a lot of exonerations under her belt, so I can agree with that. But I really do have to go.
Where do you got to go?
Off of me because I went 45 minutes longer than I said I would. So
where are you going?
Fun.
Where are you going?
He's going bowling. He's going bowling.
Yeah, somebody else.
Are you going? Somebody else bowling.
Yeah. So anyway.
Hey, can I get that tape back I loaned you of Nixon bowling in the White House? That cassette tape?
Yeah. Along with the 3 gunmen on the grassy knoll.
Yeah. Hey, say hello to Jackie Treehorn for me, would you?
Yes.
Treehorn.
And
alrighty, guys.
Watch out for the nihilists.
Yes, indeed.
Flee. Thank you very much, Erekose. Travis, one final question before I let you go. Is as a lawyer, seeing what's going on in Wisconsin, seeing the people likes of Ken Kratz, as a lawyer, are they a source of, in effect, embarrassment that you've got people like that involved in the legal system?
Well, what's the name of that great series that we've just recently watched? Is it Exhibit A?
Oh, yes.
Well, as you can see, Texas has even more embarrassment than Wisconsin when it comes to forensic evidence. And Texas leads the country in embarrassing court decisions involving the death penalty. If you look at a lot of the recent jurisprudence, you can't execute somebody who has limited mental capabilities, social capabilities. You can't execute somebody, a juvenile, somebody under 18. You can't, you can't do this, you can't do that. A good 80% of those cases are somebody versus Texas.
Right.
Now, in researching, and they have great print journalists in Wisconsin, none of this stuff really scoots by. They, especially the USA Today newspaper, which Farag was a reporter for until he moved back over to, I think he's with another affiliate. But there's a case where a clear-cut case of planting evidence by a sheriff's deputy in another county, and this thing, that thing, the other. I don't know how it plays in Wisconsin, and which is why Tracy is such a valuable asset. That she does have legal background, but she's on the ground there and knows the pulse of all of this stuff, and is really familiar with a lot of these cases. And so, some of this stuff's got to be highly embarrassing, right, to these folks. Some of that came out, in MAM1 about who had what evidence with regard to that civil case. When were memos done? Were memos, was stuff in the safe? I think one of the most telling things was it Kosurik that said on the stand about the DNA, exonerating him. You still think he's guilty? And he said something paraphrasing, I think he's still guilty, even though DNA exonerated him. That can have, whatever it was, and then the judge even said, I think he could have chosen his words more carefully. Was Kosurik also the one that in the media said, if we wanted to frame him, it would just been easier to kill him?
Well, it was Kosurik's sort of right-hand man, Couchet, that actually said about the fact that, was there DNA, DNA being planted? And of course, it's Kenneth Peterson that was the one that said that it would be easier to kill him than to free.
And the judge said, extremely poor choice of words. And the judge said it very interestingly. I'm assuming it doesn't know exactly how that came off, but it's troubling. And he could have chosen a much better example, but that was part of the motion where they did this highly unusual and, to my knowledge, unprecedented deal where they were going to have a Manitowoc jury, but they were going to try the case in Calumet County because of the conflict of interest. And, but there are all these crazy things too about that they don't make any sense. And could easily lead to someone thinking about these other things. Here's two quick examples. Nobody's supposed to be back in the jury area, not in the jury room, but even in the jury area. But yet, the pizza delivery guy is related to one of the sheriff's deputies whose responsibility is to keep the jury separate, and yet he's back there in the area. There's no evidence that he came into contact with any of the jurors, but he was in an area where he wasn't supposed to be. The circumstances of that juror getting excused by the judge and saying, I want off the jury, which was a private conversation with the judge that the attorneys weren't privy to. And then later on, he says, no, I was told to get off the jury, and I was steadfastly for not guilty. And just all these different things, but yet it seems like they documented all of these screw ups, and you just don't do that. And so, is it bumbling and sheer stupidity? Yes, no doubt. Is it sinister and intentional planting of evidence? Zellner thinks so. She's firmly of the opinion in her briefs that Colburn planted the vehicle, and that the person that was most likely to have access would be Bobby and Scott. And so which came first, the chicken or the egg? They saw, our car's over there. Let's, it's just, and the truth of the matter is, hopefully the system works and those guys can get out. And then if that happens, we'll probably never know the answer. Is because there's not, there's no smoking gun DNA that's involved, which was, originally hoped by Zellner, not DNA, but blood aging. But she abandoned the blood vial from the previous case pretty quickly and went with a new theory. And, it was really hoped that, this blood aging system would work, because that really would have put an arrow through the chest of law enforcement and whatnot. But it's just, I've said this many, many, many times, I've just never seen this number of critical errors. And then, they document them, distances and inside the garage where the 2 bullet fragments were allegedly found and documented. That gets changed, and contamination of the DNA pulled off of FL, and there's no remaining DNA, and then a deviation of protocol to call that test good, where it's the only documented circumstance where they ever deviated from protocol was this particular case. And just on and on and on and on. It's just, it's just bizarre. And yet all of those things were documented, where if somebody was just really out, Culhane wouldn't document that her DNA came back in the mix. Here's my bottom line. When you start to get, even when you're developing a theory in the legal context, you're trying to come up with an alternate theory to do what? Undermine the confidence of the verdict. You start putting this stuff together, okay, we know this guy is innocent. What's the more logical theory in a non-DNA case where you don't, have somebody's DNA that's at the crime scene, but you do have other forensic evidence that's very helpful, like Zellner's developed. You start putting together these theories, but when you start to get into things that require a conspiracy of more than 3 people, you pretty much abandon that theory and move to something else. And how many conspirators does she have involved? She's got exactly 3. Depending, because she uses Ryan as an alternate. It's either Bobby and Scott, or it's Ryan, not the 3 of them, in addition to Colburn planning the car. So you've got either 2 or you've got 3. When you start getting above 3 people, defense attorneys know it just doesn't happen. Even when you stumble into things and you uncover it, it's usually 1 or 2 really bad guys. And it's usually a lab guy and an investigator who's trying to move up in the world. But, you start getting 4, 5, 6 people that some of these theories, and Farag published an article back in that year of the trials about the top 10 conspiracy theories, and what the pros and cons were of each one. But when you get to stuff that's 4, 5, 6 people, it's just so difficult to do that you try and find something that's simpler and easier to explain, which she's done, and she's done it from every angle: time, line of sight. Everything fits so perfect with her version of events, whereas you have to ignore so much with the state's version of events, like the bus driver, and one thing after another. Whereas Zellner goes out and explains, okay, would it be plausible for Bobby to be able to catch up to her? And she showed that quite conclusively with that video, which is an exhibit in the appellate court. And she's just done such a fantastic job. And it's fine for other people to develop other theories and other opinions about how they think things happen. My point on that is just that you have to be able to clearly separate the two, and that some of it can even be counterproductive to what Zellner's doing. There was an issue that came up about 4 months ago, and somebody said, well, you know, this, that. And I said, well, and it was in the context, why doesn't Zellner release all these documents? She didn't want to release them all because she doesn't want people pouring through them and coming up with theories that are counterproductive to what she's laid out. Now, you know, people go and get them, and I can't remember the specific example, but we were talking about it, just a few of us, and I said, well, that could be very problematical. That would destroy her theory on Bobby, for example. And but I'll tell you, this case has way more than its fair share of oddities, errors, coincidences. It's a very strange case.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, you know, when it comes to this whole idea of a sort of huge conspiracy, I think we've sort of touched on this before, that you only need two or three bad apples within the sheriff's department, but because all compasses point north, you know, everybody comes into line with you know, this. You know, when you get stuff like Fassbender telling Shalheen, try and put her in this bedroom or the garage, and you've got the police saying, you know, a couple of hours after Teresa is reported missing, have we got Stephen Avery in custody?
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, that stuff pops out, and you know, that stuff, and that was highlighted in the trial. You know, it's not lost on it wasn't lost on two, I call them kids, they're not, two graduate students, two women. It wasn't lost on them either, you know. I mean, that's right in their edits. And you know, it wasn't lost on Dean or Jerry, and you know, they pounded all of that stuff hard, because that's one of the things you look for, is a rush to judgment, confirmatory bias. I was just at an actual innocence seminar a week or two ago with an exoneree here in Texas, and his was a non-DNA case. They really lucked out with a fingerprint, and awesome lawyer up there, runs an innocent project with the University of North Texas, and just a great guy. But they also had the ICU, Integrity Conviction Unit head, real nice lady, Sylvia, a lawyer that heads that up. And in her presentation, she talked about prosecutorial psychology. And she said, yeah, you know, there was these old things, you know, and, you know, I researched this and looked it up. She said, I've never heard the term before, but they talk about some of these DA offices. You know, they're tracking conviction rates, and they would give out a gift card, a $25 gift card to Starbucks for whoever had the most convictions that month. And we're like, what? And no, you just don't do stuff like that. But yet 20 years ago, 10 years ago, it was commonplace in some offices, because it's human nature to be competitive and, you know, to come out on top. And, you know, especially good, effective trial lawyers, you know, they're wired a certain way. But there's studies on this prosecutorial psychology that what the profile, so to speak, of the typical person that goes over the line, and it's somebody, you know, more experienced, been there a long time, suffering burnout, going to trial one after the other, and those are the people you would least likely expect. You know, an experienced trial lawyer, prosecutor, they've seen it all. They've seen, okay, well, you know, there's just not enough here. They've got enough experience where they can, they're not going to be pushed around by a detective. They say, hey, hold on, you know, you're the detective, I'm the prosecutor. You know, I'm telling you, you don't got enough here.
Yeah.
And, you know, get me something else. And looking at it with an objective eye, and not, we're all part of the same team and end up with, you know, a horrible result. But yeah, these things you mention happen at a lot of places. And so, no, I don't think they have a sense of embarrassment where they, even in this exoneration case, the prosecutor left the Dallas DA's office and is in private practice somewhere, but he refuses to talk about this particular case. And because they just don't want to admit that they made a mistake. And because it's all part of the psychology of it. And so it's good that there are people such as yourself looking at this. But, you know, it happens in every country, continental Europe, the UK, you know, all across the British Commonwealth, all across the US. It's a system that involves humans, and so there's always going to be human error. And that error can range from anywhere to a perfect storm of inadvertent mistakes and non-critical thinking to sinister, outright malfeasance by either prosecutors or law enforcement or both. But, you know, we still keep seeing cases get reversed based on Brady. Brady's an old case. Everybody knows what Brady means, yet it still happens. But I don't know if that answers the question, but, you know, it's